What up, YouTube? It's May the 6th right now. It's about 7:55 going on 8 o'clock. This is the scenery. This is where I'm at. No notes like always, just smoking a cigarette. So anyway, I'm going to the chapter. It's called Battle of Yarmuk. Now this battle took place in northwestern Jordan, right? And it was... Damn, I'm looking at all these words coming up on my phone. What the heck? Hold on, let me turn it off. Anyway, it took place along that river in northwestern Jordan called the Yarmuk River. And it was around the same time when Khalid ibn al-Walid re-signified the terms between the Muslims and the bishops at Damascus. So this is 636. It's mentioned as being a month of Rajab. So that's between August and September. It would be August the 9th, between August the 9th and September the 6th. All right, so that's when this happened. Now, the beginning of the chapter, they say Heraclius, he put together like a army or whatever. He amassed a big army. And this is when the head of the Ghassanids comes up, Jabala ibn Aham. So Heraclius sent the commander over the Greeks, but he also chose Jabala ibn Aham to be the head of what they mention as the Arabized Arabs, which is basically the ones in Syria. The term that they mentioned, this is the first time I came across this term, because I know about the difference between the Adonites and the Quatanites based on the first chapters that I read. But as far as those Adonites in Syria, they referred to them as Mustaribai. So I'm like, okay, that's another word that I learned. But anyway, they had him as the head of them. Now, altogether, as far as the quote-unquote enemy, it was about 200,000 of them, supposedly, that fought against the Muslims. So they met at Yarmuk. Now, as far as the Muslim side, the chapter says that it was about 24,000 of them. But, they fought hard or whatnot, and at least 70,000 of the enemy died. And then the rest of them ran off, as far as the chapter is concerned. So, I'm gonna go ahead. I ain't gonna go to the next portion. I'm gonna mention everything, but as far as the reality of it, I'm gonna go in chronological order instead of going in chronological order of the chapter verbatim. Basically, when they lost against the Muslims, right? Later on in the chapter, they mentioned that Heraclius, he was at Antioch during this time. Again, remember, that's southwestern Turkey. When he heard about this, he left. And I guess, based on his supposed statement, he felt like he was never going to really enter back into Syria again, as far as it being a strong, or those provinces in Syria still being a stronghold of the Byzantines via the Ghassanid people or kingdom. So when he left Antioch, he decided to go back to Constantinople, and he passed a place called Al-Darba. Again, that's another place that I looked for, and I couldn't find it specifically, but it's in Turkey at least. Probably still southwestern Turkey, because when he passed Al-Darba, he looked over the land of Syria. In other words, the direction of Syria, right? And he said something like, basically the words that he said suggested that he was going to miss Syria because it was great land and that the Muslims will enjoy it based on the pasture that they had. So again, it was really verdant, I guess, is what he was trying to say. Not guess, but that's basically what he was trying to say. But then he left. Now, going back to this battle of Yarmuk, before I mention Maslama, during the battle, because I'm trying to keep in order, the chapter mentions a whole bunch of people that fought, and they mention a guy that died there as well. But like some of the people that fought there was Al-Ash'ath ibn Qais. Remember, he was mentioned from a prior chapter. Another guy named Hashim ibn Utbah, and then another guy named Kubash ibn Qais. Now, as far as Hashim ibn Utbah or Ba and Al-Ash'ath ibn Qais, they survived, but each one of them had lost an eye at this battle. And then it's interesting because then they bring up Abu Sufyan. Remember, he was one of the heads of the Quraysh tribe. At this point, he's Islamic, obviously, because, well, after Mecca got invaded, he became Islamic. Remember, that also occurred in, I want to say 529, 530. No, 529, 530 is when they built the mosque there of Haran. So Mecca got invaded in 529. After that point, he was converted to Islam. But, they mentioned him as far as when he first lost his eye, which is at the Battle of Taif. Now, that happened in 530. That was after Mecca. So that happened at 530, and he lost the eye during that whole little battle. I didn't know that, but, during that time, he was also freshly Islamic as well. So they just basically make like a comparison between those two as far as Al-Ash and Hashim ibn Akbar, Utbah, that lost their eye, and going back to what happened when Abu Sufyan suffered the same fate. But he does have a little bit of more relevance than just that, because he also fought at this battle of Yarmuk as well, because he wanted to see some of his sons, Yazid for instance. So his wife, which was Hind ibn Utbah, joined him, and she actually fought there as well. I took a note. I thought that was interesting, because they're a nice little age up until this point. And I'm like, damn, they still fighting, which I'll go a little further into as far as my interest in that aspect in a second. I'm going to do that toward the end of this. But yeah, they fought there. And let me see what else. Another guy named Ammar ibn Abu Waqas. He fought there as well, but he ended up dying. Now, he does have a little significance. Now, this is when I switch back into the Wikipedia articles, as far as the background of some of these people. The thing about him I thought was interesting is that he also came from Mecca. He was a part of the Quraysh tribe. Him and his brother, they didn't mention him, but he had a brother named Sa'd ibn Abu Waqas also. Both of them came from the Zurah clan within Mecca under the Quraysh clan. At the beginning of Muhammad's whole revolution, his brother Sa'd ibn Abu Waqas converted. He was around 17 years old, so that means he was he was around 17 years old. So that means he was born in like 600. It's a little discrepancy. Some people say 695. I'm gonna say 600, because if he converted at the age of 17, I'm gonna say 600. Anyway, he converted. But he was raised under Jahiliyyah, just like his brother, Ammar. And when he converted, his mom found out about this. His other brother, as far as Ammar, converted around the same time, and he himself, as far as Sa'id, was responsible for converting his brother, by the way, so don't let me forget that. But anyway, when his mom found out, she, protested it or whatever. And she told him that she was going to starve herself to death unless he decided to switch his religion. And he remained steadfast, and she stopped eating and everything. And he eventually told her, he said, look, even if you live over and over again, this ain't the words verbatim, but this is basically where he pointed to. He said, even if you live over and over again, I'm going to maintain my faith in Islam. So in the next life, if you choose to starve yourself again, hypothetically speaking, it's going to be the same result as far as on my half of it. So eventually she fell back and she accepted his beliefs. And again, Sa'd, around this same period, converted his brother, because when I read about his brother, Ammar ibn Abu Waqas, as far as his background, the same thing came up, so it has to be around that same time frame. But he was also, in the earlier years, let me see, when he converted, as far as Damascus, he is potentially, even though they say he is in this chapter, I read other people's names as well, but he is potentially one of the people that when Umar became caliph in August 5th, after that, when they met in Damascus, when he met Khalid ibn al-Walid at Damascus, Ammar ibn Abu Waqas supposedly is the person that delivered the message personally to Abu Ubaidah, letting him know that he was now the chief of the Rashidun army under Khalid ibn al-Walid, and also around 630, when Muhammad first went to northwestern Arabia, and particularly Tabuk. He was one of those people that went along with him, as well as Shurabil ibn Hassana, obviously, because he was the person that delivered Muhammad's terms to the people of Elah, as I mentioned previously before this. But anyway, Ammar ibn Abu Waqas ended up dying at this battle of Yarmuk, so he was a martyr there. As far as Jabala ibn Aham, the head of the Ghassanid people, they say like after this, because it's like two interpretations within this chapter. They say that after that battle, you know, he, as far as the dialogue between him and the Muslims, because they didn't get really specific, but as far as the dialogue between him and the Muslims, you know, he recognized the fact that they were all brethren based on their roots. In other words, again, going back to Mustariba, or them just being Adonites. So he referenced that, and let me see, he converted to Islam supposedly, and you know, later on down the line, as far as what the chapter mentions, you know, it was a little conflict that happened between him and Muzayna. Now I looked that up, and other than it being also a name, I couldn't find out exactly what they meant by that word in this chapter. But whoever this is, or those people, or that person, he got into a little argument or a fight with them, and he knocked out the person's eye. When Umar found out about it later on, he wanted him punished for that. But you know, he had he had a little funny attitude about it. He felt like, you know, he should be impugned from facing any type of consequence because of who he is. He said he didn't want to live nowhere to where, or in a town to where somebody else had authority over him. So, you know, because of that, he ended up apostatizing, really just giving up his faith in Islam, and then he went to Turkey. Now, the second interpretation is that, again, not too specific, but when he did have a conversation with Umar, who came to Syria later, he was trying to get him to convert to Islam. And he was like, look, if you convert to Islam, you know, you'll pay a sadaqah. Yeah, you'll pay a sadaqah. You wouldn't have to pay land tax or a carge. But Jabala, he didn't want to, he wanted to maintain his faith, and he was willing to pay a sadaqah, but he didn't want to pay the land tax. In other words, he didn't want to be a zimmi there. You know, he wanted to be exempt from this, you know, like if you get to maintain your faith, you got to pay some type of tax because of that. He didn't want to be subject to that. So Umar was like, listen, either you become a Muslim and you pay the sadaqah, or you maintain your faith, but you'll have to pay a land tax, or you could just go elsewhere. And so that's the option that he chose, and he, you know, took like 30,000 of his men, and then he left and went to Turkey from that point. Now, I think then they basically, you know, they kind of like go back, and they mention how, okay, when the Muslims first heard about the Romans or the Byzantinians deciding to, you know, amass a huge number of troops and meeting them at Yarmuk, because they had hymns at this point. And I don't know, I'm going to say this before I finish. I don't necessarily 100% agree with this part, but they say like the Muslims went to the people of hymns, and they was like, listen, we're going to give y'all back y'all sadaqahs. Y'all don't have to pay. Basically, just take care of yourselves. In other words, it was going to relinquish their hold over the people of hymns. And then the people of hymns put up an argument and was like, well, and by the way, they was going to do that because they felt like they couldn't afford it, because now they have to fight the Byzantinians or whatever. So the people of hymns was like, no, we rather you guys have rule over us than go back to the Romans, because then we'll be living back in tyranny. So will every other city or province that you have taken on to this point. And they decided to side with the Muslims and then close their city gates and prepare to fight if they have to. But again, because the Muslims was victorious, eventually, you know, the people opened up their city gates and celebrated Hoo-yah, Hoorah, whatever. You know what I'm saying? After that point, supposedly. See that particular part, I think that's an exaggeration again. And then, let me see, after that, basically, they mentioned Kenashrin again, but, you know, they real brief about it. They say that Abu Ubaidah, or the Muslims, eventually they took Kenashrin and Antioch. Don't want to think too much further into that, because again, like I say, Kenashrin, after the chapter about Palestine, is a chapter by itself, so they'll go a little bit more into detail as far as what happened with them. Then after that, they go back mentioning as Simt. Remember, he was the dude that fought at Hems. And they basically, you know, reiterated on how well he fought at Hems, and did they mention that he also fought at the Battle of Yarmuk. But this part, I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was the father of Shurabil ibn Hassana. They did mention that, because he had went and had a conversation with, I think, Umar. Umar. He had a conversation or some type of dialogue with Umar. And he was saying that he missed his son and he wanted to be with his son. Because around this time when he had this little dialogue with him, his son Shurabil ibn Hassana was in Al-Kufa, all right, which is, again, Iraq. And it was a little conflict going on in Al-Kufa as far as the heads of the Kendal tribe. So Shurabil ibn Hassana, you know, was, I don't want to say arguing, but I guess communicating with Al-Ash'ath ibn Qais at that time, and he wanted to be with his son. So he was like, okay, listen, either, you know, I'll go to Al-Kufa and be with my son, or you can send my son back to Hems with me. So ultimately speaking, that's what Umar eventually did. He granted him that wish, and his son was able to go back to Hems from that point. That's everything as far as the chapter, I believe. I don't think I'm missing anything, and again, if I am, that's 90%. It's a short chapter. The next chapter is the conquest of Palestine. So they're going, I'm assuming, being that Ammar ibn al-Asi as-Sami, ultimately, as was mentioned in the last chapter, even though I didn't mention that in my blog because it wasn't that relevant, you know, again, just like they mentioned in the very first chapter when they talk about the Holy War and it being declared, he is going to be in control over the province of Palestine. So in the next chapter, I'm pretty sure he is going to come up in that regard. Now, that's it. That's all the essentials. Now, as far as, you know, the references, I did find a few things, a couple of things to stand out about this chapter. Okay, as far as, this is going back to the Wikipedia articles on this portion, as far as Hashem ibn Utbar. When I looked him up, not too much came up, but another guy by the name of Utbah ibn Rabiah, all right, he came up. Now, remember that lady, all right, Hind bint Utbah. Can't say ibn because it's more like a male translation, meaning son of. Bint is daughter of. But her, for instance, she was actually this guy's daughter. As far as Utbah ibn Rabiah, she was his daughter. Now, as far as when his name came up, I did some additional research. Now, this is going back to the Battle of Badr, which I already talked about. In fact, I wrote a whole fucking verse about it, a draft verse. But, you know, they went into a little bit more details as far as what happened there. Because, you know, as far as like Arabian culture, when battles happen, as a part of their tradition, you know, sometimes they had these little side skirmishes or duels to the death. Same thing happened with Kabar also, as far as Azubair. Let me throw that up in there. But they had like these little side duels. And sometimes it'd be like 3-on-3, 2-on-2, or 1-on-1, but it was supposed to be to the death. Now, at this battle with Badr, Muhammad's other uncle, not Al-Abbas ibn al-Muttalib, but Hamza ibn al-Muttalib. Remember, like, as far as like when I was talking about Jawf al-Yamama, you know, he came up, and I mentioned that he got killed at this battle or whatnot, in which he did. But he came up and he had, as far as Utbah ibn Rabiah, there was a 3-on-3 duel. It was him, his brother, a guy by the name of Sheba ibn Utbah, and his son, Walid ibn Utbah. And they fought against Muhammad's uncle, Hamza ibn al-Muttalib, Ali, and then another guy named Abu Ubaidah, I believe, al-Harith. So Hamza ibn al-Muttalib ended up killing Rabiah. And then Ali killed his son, Walid ibn Utbah. And then the last guy that I mentioned, Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Harith, killed, well, he didn't kill, but he fought against this guy, but he got injured. He got injured by Sheba ibn Utbah. So I thought that was interesting. That was like a little bit more details as far as that battle, because like I said, I already know about it, but that particular part, I didn't know that much about it, but that came up. So that, you know, like I said, that was interesting. Now, as far as the name itself, Hashim ibn Utbah, I'm not sure his relation to Rabiah, even though I know he does have some type of relation. And as far as Abu Sufyan, his daughter Hind, being married to him, they both also had a daughter by the name of, well, in the book they call her Hababa. But her name is actually Ramla bint ibn Utbah. She was their daughter, which I think is weird, but she was born around, they say, 594 AD. So I read about her too. I put her in my jargon because I thought it was interesting. And when I read about her, I was like, wow, I didn't know this. Now, a long time ago in the earlier chapters, I always said, of course, you know, the Arab Spring during the 7th century and the spread of Islam into Africa happened through North Africa as well. But I always was like, okay, I think I always said also through West Africa, through the Sudan as well. Because what I noticed as far as reading Islamic history, especially, you know, going back that far, they don't really say too much as far as Islam being spread through East Africa, not West Africa, East Africa, Ethiopia. But I'm like, shit, it obviously had to happen in some type of shape, way, or form, you know what I'm saying? So going back to her, you know, she was like one of those people during like the first 2 major migrations, because remember, Shurabil also went there as well. I had to double check to make sure to keep that in mind, but he went there. She was one of those people that had also escaped as well, which I think is interesting because, again, she's a daughter of Abu Sufyan, one of the head chiefs of Quraysh during the period when they were at war with Muhammad. So I was like, okay, I'm reading about her, and it was like, okay, she lived in Ethiopia, whatnot, with the rest of the people, and she had ended up becoming one of Muhammad's wives. He had sent a proposal to her. Now, this is where I thought it was fucking juicy at, right? Now, I already know about what happened as far as when they went to Ethiopia, especially concerning Jafar. Now, remember, that was Muhammad's cousin, Jafar ibn Abu Talib. He was the son of Abu Talib, the guy that raised Muhammad after his parents had died, you know, along with, you know, the lady that helped raise him as well, Ayman, the Ethiopian. But, yeah, you know what I'm saying? As far as, like, Jafar, like, during that period, remember, as I mentioned in, you know, the first few blogs that I did about this topic, you know, when he went to Ethiopia and then the tribe of Quraysh had sent delegates after him, that's when the little conversation happened as far as the Negus at the time, Ashama ibn Abjar, between him and those delegates, and they was telling him, you know, these people were criminals. They needed, they you know, they had a certain belief in Jesus or interpretation of him that will offend the Christians of Ethiopia, etc. And that's when he went to Jafar ibn Abu Talib, had a conversation with him, and based on the conversation, you know, it was recognized that they both shared the same interpretation as far as Jesus, and he allowed them to stay after that point. Now, I knew about that, but in reading about this, I'm like, okay, now this is a kingdom at the time, you know, the Aksumite kingdom, be it at Muhammad, and I'm going to say this probably happened around 622. And I'm going to mention further why I think that's the case. Now, being that Muhammad would send a message to, you know, Ethiopia for her, or a proposal for her to be one of his wives or whatnot, and for the Negus, all right, the Negus / king, Ashama ibn Abjar to receive the message somehow and then have it delivered directly to her through one of his maids, a lady by the name of Abraha. I'm like, that's pretty significant. Not only does, aside from this, the whole Islamic revolution still going on, I'm like, that's pretty fucking big recognition to have a king of the Aksumites deliver a message to a woman who was on the run from the Quraysh tribe from Muhammad for her to join him in marriage. And when this message was delivered to her, she gave the lady Abraha, she gave her, like, I think they said they mentioned a bangle or something like that, but basically she gave her some jewelry in return. She eventually agreed to marry Muhammad, and then like a ceremony and a feast occurred. Now they say Abyssinia, but again, this is in Ethiopia, Ethiopia at the time. So a ceremony and a feast happened, and going back to the king, Ashama ibn Abjar, he actually spoke at this ceremony. They call it a cupbar. He actually spoke, and then after he spoke, Khalid ibn Sa'id gave a speech. I had to double check. I'm like, this sounds too fucking good to be true. I reread it. I'm like, okay, this is actually a real genuine Wikipedia article. But that's what happened. After he gave a speech, also Khalid ibn al-Walid was there, because Ramla, or Habibah, or Ramla, anyway, Ramla, she chose to have him as her guardian there. So then after this whole little ceremony was over, a feast was held. And the Negus, he had gave Khalid 400 dinars or whatever. So eventually he decided to, send them back to Muhammad, and it was about like 30 of them left at this time. I know at least 60 people went across the fucking Red Sea, but it was like about 30 of them left by this time. And Shurabil ibn Hassana joined Ramla on the way back to Muhammad, to Medina basically. So I'm thinking like this may be around 622, because that's when a significant amount of people had also went back as well. So that's the time frame that I'm assuming. Then she had to bereave. I guess she lost her husband or whatnot, but she had to bereave for 4 months. And then eventually she married Muhammad in 628. Now, that reference, or that date actually comes from Tariq al-Tabari, based on what I read on this Wikipedia article, because they cited that. So I was like, okay, that was fucking interesting to me. I didn't know that. I was like, wow, all right. Again, that's heavy recognition. It's something else that just slipped my mind that I forgot. I think that's about it, basically. So again, that was just a little further background information about that. So that's it as far as this chapter. Like I said, the next one is called The Conquest of Palestine. And then after that, the chapter about what happened when he went to Kinashrin. So again, this is off the dome. I hate that it got dark out here, because I wanted to show my face the whole time. So again, May 6th, I don't know what time it is by this point, but I'll holler at y'all on the next one. But again, this is for like documentation purposes, self-expression, not to do nobody's homework. Y'all have a great night.